What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Apartment 113 podcast, where we talk with cool folks in the cannabis and psychedelics industry to learn about their projects and celebrate their successes. My name is Rob Sanchez, and this is episode 23. We're joined today by certified Ganjier and founder of Sage Advice, Cannabis Education and Lifestyle, Elizabeth Sage. Elizabeth runs a weekly program to keep certified Ganjiers connected to one another and uses her corporate experience to help cannabis businesses succeed. She has seen the unique Minnesotan cannabis industry spring up over the last few years and has begun providing a series of digital courses. Connect with her on LinkedIn and find out more at thesageganjier.com. Enjoy the show. Elizabeth, welcome. Thanks for jumping on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, always happy to have a Ganjier on the show and talk shop about the cannabis connoisseurship and education side of the business.
Yeah, and the education side, I think, is probably the most important and often the most overlooked side of the cannabis business. So I'm always happy to shed light and hopefully provide resources to people as much as I can.
It can be easy to jump right to the end product with cannabis and kind of skip the education, right? It's like just jumping in without caring how deep the pool is or what temperature.
Yes, I'm very much a just try it, and then if we have to go back to the directions, that's the way I do things. And I think a lot of times with products, it can be similar, act now.
When did you get your Ganjier certification?
I got my certification in September of 2021, and I was in the very first class that got their certifications.
Oh, awesome.
The
inaugural class.
The inaugural class, yeah.
Excellent.
I wanted to be in the inaugural class of trainees as well, but I couldn't quite get my email in fast enough and ended up in the second class, which I think in hindsight was a blessing because I had already seen at that point the opportunity for community to be created. So having a little bit of extra space in a class that had gone through prior to me and having gotten some feedback from that allowed us to create a pretty special opportunity the very first time I went out there.
Oh, so actually being able to build or iterate on that first round. I think the first draft of anything is always a little bumpy, no matter the intentions or the planning. It's meant to be a learning experience, huh?
Well, and certainly in the cannabis space, everything is a bit of a learning experience, right? It's still too immature of a market to have people who have tried and true methods of doing pretty much anything.
That's a good point. Yeah, as much as everyone wants to look over the state borders and look for that perfect solution, it still hasn't been laid out yet. There's not a book on it, right?
No, I mean, there's lots of books on it, but none of them have quite nailed exactly what public policy looks like when it meets good regulations. And then, of course, you throw into the fact that it's all still federally illegal, and that just puts a big wet blanket on everything.
Hey, indeed, yeah. And it also creates these little micro economies within each state, for better or worse.
It does. Somebody told me the other day, we don't have one industry, we have 37 industries in a trench coat. And I was like, that is the best analogy that I've heard to explain, because we're trying to operate as one and we're pretending, but at the same time, there's like arms coming out over here. There's three heads, like the leg is falling off.
Right. That's a really good way to look at the industry overall, struggling along there, masquerading as a CPG industry.
But so when I took the Ganjier program, I started the online portion. I applied for it right when it opened. I paid my tuition the first chance I could. I took my course, I was so enthusiastic about it because my background is in sales and marketing, and I come from private investment world and the consulting world. And so, but I've been a cannabis lover my whole life, and I've always intrinsically understood that it worked for me and that I liked the version of myself that used it better than the other versions of myself, but there was never a marketplace or a space for me to break into it. And I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I grew up in northern Minnesota, but spent 15 years in Chicago in most of my 20s and 30s. And so it was really interesting when I left Chicago in 2018. Within 6 months of my leaving, the governor legalized by executive order there. So it was not on the radar. It just happened after I left, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me, right? Because at that point, even Illinois was still fairly an early adopter of adult use cannabis. And so, having spent 5 years here, about 2 years into my stint back in Minnesota, when I heard about the Ganjier program, it was sort of like my shining light moment when I was like, oh, like that's what I need because I have all of these great skills and I have a love of cannabis, but I don't have a deep technical knowledge on it. And having spent as many years as I did in finance and never fully understanding all the nuances of it, I knew that I wanted to be like the people that I would listen, talk to about derivatives and, um, you know, all of these different things. And they knew what they were talking about and it all made sense in their head. And so I was like, this to me was the opportunity to get that level of education. And
Right.
I want to hear conversations and not be like, I did not understand that. So that's
Yeah,
really
having
what it
that
provided
financial
me with.
level of understanding or that solid ground of understanding, right, and base of
Yeah.
knowledge to pull from and build on.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes a lot of our community conversations so cool is we all have this very solid foundation and you don't ever have to wonder, do they know about X, Y, and Z? Because it's like, nope, I know the education we all have. We can just move right past that and we can go into these harder, more difficult, more intriguing, current things that are happening.
Definitely, yes. And I think that the Ganjier training course, the first piece of the certification for listeners is the training, which is an online series of courses covering
10 modules. Yep.
cannabis science, all steps of cannabis production,
Breeding,
history,
cultivation,
politics.
history. Yeah.
There's a lot buried in there in those 10 modules and a lot of ancillary reading and extra things to dig
Hmm.
into as well that all come before an on-site process with the Ganjier Council themselves where you can learn a little bit more. It's a little bit of a review of some of the modules and then a kind of a deep dive into a protocol that Ganjiers use to rate and review flower and concentrates in the
Correct.
cannabis space.
The Systematic Assessment Protocol, or SAP for short.
Yes, yeah, and it's a very good process to get all that feedback as even as a experienced consumer or a longtime smoker in other terms, you can really pick out some flavors and aromas. But having folks to bounce that off of and kind of weigh the thoughts on started to define some of those aromas and things further for me. The Ganjier process was excellent, excellent all around. I think for folks interested in getting that extreme level of knowledge and understanding, and being able to spread that themselves.
Well, and what I think is so cool about it is just the markers of quality, right? So you mentioned the aroma and being able to pick out the particular terpenes, but to be able to smell that aroma and say like, is this the expression that the plant wanted, or is this like a lessened expression? And if it's lessened, is that
Yes.
because it was grown under a different kind of lights? Was it improperly handled? Was it not cured properly? Like to be able to find what that one little difference is and then the reasons why it is different, that's what really blows my mind is it's not so simple as this is good or bad, this is a 7 or a 9, but this is why it's a 9, this is why it's a 7.
Yeah, looking into some of the causes of that. And in the cannabis industry, the supply chain is so separate at times and so variable with different licenses having control of the product before it really gets to the consumer. And that's when things go wrong. That can lead to those off aromas, right? The bad kind of funk.
Well, and I mean, just not to mention like sad aromas, not bad aromas, but like 6 months down the line. And if that left the farm in pristine condition, but it went through a distribution process that didn't handle it gently, and then it sat in a warehouse for 3 months before it then went and sat in dispensary for 2 months before it moved off the shelf. Like, that's sad weed because it was good weed, but now
Right.
it's not anymore.
Yes, indeed. Right. It's been kept a little bit past its prime, or not kept in the right storage, right temperature or light conditions. Everything can start impacting that.
Exactly. So, but even being able to recognize that, right? And being able to say, like, actually, I can tell that this cultivar had all this potential, but this is possibly reasons why it's not living up to that potential right now.
Right. Degradation, or exposure to air and things like that. Yeah. Before you approached the Ganjier certification, did you have any other interests in connoisseurship, or were there any other products or types of services that you were a connoisseur of, or that you kind
I,
of appreciated in the same way as
it's so silly.
cannabis?
Like, I'm a consumer product goods girl, and in particular makeup. So I was a makeup artist for 4 years in Chicago. I had my own bridal business,
Okay.
and so, but like, I love doing that because it gave me this ability to go into a cosmetic store and just be like, oh, I need a little bit of this, and I want a little bit of this, and I would try all the different things, people with different skin textures, different skin types, people with different eye shapes, people like, products in beauty like cannabis, like, it's not one size fits all. Like, maybe
Hmm.
everybody needs a
Right.
foundation, right? But somebody needs a foundation for oily skin. Somebody needs a foundation for dry skin. Somebody needs to put a primer on. Somebody needs to put a moisturizer on. Like, there's all these different ways to make it fit in. And so to me, cannabis is similar to that. Like, everybody needs cannabis. They just don't all need it the same way. They might need it in a topical for shoulder pain. They might need it in a textile for clothing. They might need it in hempcrete to build their home. So not limiting it to just consumption of the product, but like really looking at it as it's all cannabis, and there's a spot for all of us in that. So I now go to dispensaries much the same way I used to go to department stores and Sephora and places like that. And
Interesting.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know that right now I need that, but I'm going to grab that because I might. And I also, like, I love sharing products. And I like, it's not just, I don't want to just smoke a joint with you. Like, I want to do that, but then I want to teach you something, and I want to put some gummies in a bag and you can take them home. And, I like the idea of layering products when it comes to whether it's, cosmetics or cannabis. And I think it's really interesting what we've done and all of the cool formulations that people have come up with. And I think once people realize how many different options there are, it really opens up a lot of different avenues.
Yes, yeah, as classic as the hand rolled joint is, and as delicious as that really is, there are hundreds of applications
So
and so
many.
many products that the analog or the connection there, between the kind of makeup CPG or beauty CPG space and cannabis is great. That's a good perspective to have on it, as it is just so consumer dependent, and even different needs that companies aren't addressing are being met. Just because folks have found it or found that it works for them. It's a similar market for sure, and with hundreds and hundreds of SKUs and cannabis products, it can be hard for folks that don't have an established consumption pattern, I think, to know where to look. It's not only jumping into the deep end of the pool, it's like looking at many different pools and wondering which one is going to be which one is the
Right.
one for you, right?
And knowing, like, it's a little bit scary because, like, am I going to jump into the pool that, like, suddenly I'm going to drown in, right? And I think that's everybody's fear, is that suddenly they'll jump into a pool and it's made of lithium and they're just going to, like,
They'll have
sink to the
that
bottom.
anxious moment or that anxious event that nobody wants with cannabis.
But
Rethinking your past, or
yeah,
thinking about nothing.
present, entire life.
Yeah. So with the education side, then what would be or I guess first of all, after the Ganjier certification, you came back home and kind of went to the drawing board, or did you already have an idea to take that certification and get some traction with it?
So I did. My story is interesting because as I did all of this during COVID, right? So I just have to, like, let everybody go back. It was 2020 when I first heard about it and applied. It was early 2021 when I got accepted. It started in April of 2021. And like I said, I jumped into it. I was very excited. I did all my modules. I started a study group with other people that I found online. And in May, I found out, or it might have been June, that I was pregnant at 40, almost 40. I was 41. And I have two older kids, and that was definitely not on our radar. But like I say, COVID, it was weird. Like things were just weird during COVID. And so I found myself in a spot where, my other two kids I had not consumed during my pregnancy because again, I lived in Chicago. I had a very corporate job. It just wasn't even on my radar. And so here I was, I just started this program, and the entire, focus of it is assessing cannabis. And, I had a nurse who was in the program that I called immediately, and I was like, oh my God, like, what do I do? And, she talked me through a lot of things and sent me a lot of different resources to look at. And my OBGYN here, I sat down, and I was a medical cannabis patient. So to be very clear, like it was really important to me to have my card because of my kids, right? I qualified for it in Minnesota, and even though it's quite expensive, it was $200 for my doctor's appointment and another 200 for the application. It's $400 a year. I wanted to have that because I was qualified for it, not because I ever got my products here in the state of Minnesota, but it was the level of protection that I wanted to have as a mother consuming. And so finding myself pregnant again and, talking to my doctor and trying to be a very big girl about it, and saying like, I'm a medical cannabis patient and, I would like to consume during my pregnancy because all of my research had led me to believe that there are safe consumption modalities. And he was kind of like, all right. And I was like, okay, but talk me out of it, right? Like what are we worried about here? And he's like, I'm not really worried. And I'm like, okay, but like you deliver hundreds of babies, right? Way more than I do. And your friends all deliver babies, right? Like what's the worst that can happen? Like what are we seeing? And he's like, I don't know, like the worst that you would see is similar to a woman who smokes cigarettes during their pregnancy, and that might result in low birth weight. And I was like, oh, well, I have giant babies anyway, so it's really like a preemptive diet. And he laughed. And I was like, okay, like this is how I know we can be back and forth, right? Like you can be my doctor because you don't have concerns. You understand my jokes. And so my whole pregnancy I consumed, and it was a really interesting sort of reflective look at myself, right? Because it was hard to explain that to my parents. It was hard to explain it to my friends. It was, something my husband had to trust me with. And we have, a beautiful, very healthy, big, robust baby boy. He continues to be in the 99th percentile for
Hey,
height, weight,
congrats.
and head circumference. He's
How old is he
16
now?
months, 16 months.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Wow.
and he hits all his milestones. And I don't say that because I want people to do it either way. I want people to trust their intuition. And that's what I really
Right.
had to lean into is, I don't think that I would be on this path with these tools at my disposal if I wasn't supposed to go down it. But there's a lot of judgment that goes into it, and it's self-judgment. And it's, if I would have seen someone on the street doing what I did in the privacy of my own home, I would have judged them 100%. Like,
That
I,
stigma is ingrained.
it is, it absolutely is. And, like it's okay to say that, I think. And it's okay to say that, I want to change that. And that's why it's important to me to tell people that I did. It's important for me to tell them my experience, but also to remind them everybody's experience is their own. And you really do have to trust yourself. So, on that path, here I am, and I'm pregnant. And when I got my certification, I was pregnant. And again, this was like weird COVID times. And so I'd been working home for 18 months, and I worked for one of the largest consulting companies in the world. And they were in kind of the stages where they might want people to start coming back into the office, but they weren't fully there yet. But they wanted everyone to be vaccinated. And given my age and the fact that I had had COVID and that I worked from home, I wanted to delay that until I had delivered and the office was open. Like I was like, let me just not be pregnant when I make this decision. And
Yes, right.
they,
Just let one stressor pass
yeah,
before I handle the
and that
next.
wasn't, we couldn't come to an agreement on that. So I applied for both a medical and a religious exemption, both of which were denied. And so I actually lost my job when I was 8 months pregnant.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow, man.
So it was one of those, like, it's kind of serendipitous, right? Like, would I have ever had the courage to lose my golden handcuffs? Probably not. But I didn't really have a
Yes.
choice.
Yeah, I've experienced similar uh, corporate lessons, I think we
Yeah,
could call them in hindsight.
exactly. So
They're
I,
catalysts for future things and kind of motivations to get the right project or the right focus started.
yeah. And so for me, I think it was, I always say I got a shitty deal, but I got a good shitty deal. And, I got to keep my health care while I had my kid, and it put me
Yes.
into where I am now. And again, I don't think I ever would have had the guts to do it on my own. So I always say, even when it seems like it's a bad path, like it's all part of the path we have to take.
So then, post Ganjier, now few months after, obviously, to get back to
Yeah.
reality after home life
So it wasn't until like probably April of 2022 that I was starting to get like, okay, I can think about things again. And so I mentioned before,
takes a
starting
minute.
in early 2021, I started a study group with a woman named Lucia that I had met online that was also in the program. And we started by just going over the modules that we had been focusing on. And the need for community was so strong within Ganjier. And there was no central repository where people were able to exchange ideas and meet one another and plan things. And so, just solely by word of mouth over a year and a half's period, we built a large online community that meets every Monday still and has different subject matter experts from across the industry come in and help provide some ancillary knowledge to what Ganjier has taught us all. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we assess cultivars from across the country and calibrate them. And so making sure everybody is still looking at the same things and we're seeing the same things, looking at different parts of the country, looking to see how people are growing, if it's indoor, if it's outdoor, are they growing organic, is it living soil, is it regenerative, and then really making note of how all of those different things affect the output that the flower is producing. It's a really, really, it's like super nerdy and it's so much fun.
It's the good kind of it, right? It's nerdy down a great avenue there,
It
looking at
is.
the at cannabis quality itself and getting a cannabis experience with others is hard to beat. I
It
can't
is.
help it.
And so, I spend a lot of my free time. So I don't have a ton of free time because I have a baby, right? And I have two bigger kids and a house to run. But trying to then, launch my own business and still be able to empower the community because once I was certified, there still isn't those things in place. There's a Facebook group and a Discord, but you can only
Yes,
have
yeah.
so much that lives in those places, right? So I still spend a significant portion of my time helping that community out and driving, just driving the Ganjier ship forward. Because I always say it's like the word fetch. Like I need it to happen. I need people to understand what Ganjiers are and how incredible they are because I need that for my professional pivot. I need people to understand the oomph behind it. And I really think that day by day, week by week, we're getting closer and closer to that. It's a harder sell in certain parts of the country that have industry like the Northwest. But as we're seeing new markets come online here in the Midwest and the East Coast, I think people are really looking, they don't know who the experts are. They're looking for somebody to tell them what to do.
Yes, to come in and be able to help in any capacity. Sometimes it's just something so minor, like recommending a starting product, and other times it may be working through a bad experience or
Yeah.
establishing a more therapeutic approach to cannabis. I mean the needs kind of vary pretty drastically, but that's where that solid foundation and then the community of ganjiers really comes into play as someone may not have experienced it, but across everybody, there's a very high likelihood, that we've seen it before or that it's been encountered. And I
Yeah.
think I definitely see that more in the newer industries as well, like in the Midwest and the East. As these industries get started, it's not necessarily experienced consumers that always need that help. And honestly, experienced consumers may be a little harder to
They're
reach
harder.
if they have their opinions set or they know what they want already as well. So the folks I think that can really benefit are ones that maybe would be fearful to even enter the dispensary, right? The ones that drive past and kind of there's a little voice in their head thinking, maybe I should check that out, but nah, I'll wait because I don't really know how it is. Or the Ganjier is that perfect guide to take you in and really just explain the whole process. You could spend an hour checking out and ask questions along the whole way, right? Those kinds of things are so useful to help consumers into the market. I think there's only so many daily or regular consumers that the industry can cater to, and the therapeutic use and approach has grown, of course. But I think because of that stigma, a lot of folks maybe haven't considered it just because they don't know how to.
Right.
I mean, for
Or
lack of better
yeah,
words, right?
take that first step.
Yeah.
And so last year I spent a lot of time just trying to figure out exactly how can I help people. And I've taken some opportunities around, again, empowering Ganjiers. I helped participate in the Cowboy Cup last year. And
Which category did you judge?
so I did not judge, because I couldn't, you had to be able to be gone for like 8 days in between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yeah,
And I was
the
like,
on-site judging was
I can't do that. I just like that doesn't, I'm a mom, and the weeks before Thanksgiving and Christmas are already
prime time.
so well, and they're already so stressful. I'm like, I can't do that to myself and my family.
Yes.
But I helped with a lot of the organization. I helped with a lot of the social media, and I did go out there for the actual competition. And I mean, it was a lot of fun. And for me, the best part was seeing everybody together, because that was the first time we had a community of Ganjier from different classes all meeting together, and students. And I bet there
Right.
was 40 people representing the
Awesome.
organization there. It was a really good turnout. We
I
did
did
some
not make it
speaking
to the
panels,
event, but I did get to judge and smoke some of that Oklahoma flower. So
the
had
early
a nice
stuff.
box of samples.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So it was, again, it was all around. It was a good experience in that we got to all be together, got to see what it looks like to use the sap to judge some things. And then in April of this year, I organized the Rosin Bowl at the Casey Canna Fest, which was another really good experience. We had all certified ganjiers doing the judging, with Nika T leading us. And again, like all a great learning experience. Great to have everybody together. We did speaking panels there as well.
Oh, awesome.
So I think anytime we have the opportunity to take the stage and tell people, just spread our message and tell them what we want them to know about asking for quality and understanding the metrics of quality. And it's sort of an onus that we have to keep preaching the message.
Right. When was the KC Canifest?
That was April of 2023.
Okay, awesome. Man, next year I'll have to get over there.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that like it ends up taking so much more time than you can really even imagine. So coming out of Casey Canifest this year, I had taken Amy Porterfield's digital course building program and had been starting to build a course that I finally was able to finish in May, and am doing a live version of right now, which is I call it the Canna Basics, and it's 5 modules helping people similar to myself, but that would never want to go through the Ganjier education. They don't want to go out and smoke weed for a week in the woods. They just want to understand it from more of a caregiver model. How can this work for me?
Yes.
How can this work for my parents? How can it work for my kids? How can it work for my pets?
Right, right. So that's the approach then that Sage Advice is taking
Yep.
to rolling out cannabis education. Obviously, contributing to the Ganjier community and moving that needle forward is beyond helpful from the community perspective and for the industry. But then when Sage Advice gets involved, is what other services or kind of what's what are the
It's
details there in your
twofold.
approach?
So educational services, and like I said, Cannabis, I'm running a live version of now, and then that will live evergreen going forward. But in addition to that, other things. So I mentioned my age earlier, and I'm going to have to just get used to saying it over and over again. So I'll be 43 this year. And honestly, when I before I had my son, there was a lot of changes in my body that I thought I was going through perimenopause. And that, it can be a very long period of time. And then, I ended up getting pregnant and I'm like, oh, wow, like I really don't know shit about my body. Cool. But I want to change that, right? Like if I've lived that long going through it sort of blind and like things happen and that's what they are, I've really tried to address menopause in a different way and head on in the same zest that I've been spending the last 3 years learning about cannabis. I'm sort of shifting
Same
it
analytical
and
approach,
finding
or
where is the intersectionality between these two things. Because to me, this is the next biggest phase of our lives as women. And it's really important that, like I can remember back to the first time I got my period, I didn't even tell my mom. And like, eventually she found out and I was just like, yeah, it's cool. But again, like fast forward 30 years and I clearly had no idea what was going on. And I don't want to make that mistake as we go forward. And so what I'm seeing more and more of in my cannabis research is the issues that women face throughout menopause. A lot of them can be solved by cannabis. And so trying to
huh?
get people
Yeah,
again to see this intersectionality and not necessarily like, oh, I have a hot flash, I need to go smoke a joint. But it's like, oh, maybe I won't have a hot flash because I use this
a,
suppository all day
a
that gives me
treatment
a low
pattern,
dose.
or
Yes.
I see.
And like just
Yeah.
opening them up to that. So in mid end of July, August 1st, August, I'm starting a new live course. It's 4 weeks and it's all about women and menopause and then the intersectionality of cannabis. And it's mostly focused on menopause, but tapering in cannabis and
Okay.
involving subject matter experts to talk to us about these different things and
Wow.
bring
Awesome.
that level of professionalism in. Because the one thing that I've noticed across a lot of the different business that I do is, in particular, when it comes to the healthcare of it, people want their doctor's buy-in, and doctors want products and protocol, and that's what they want, and the language to speak it. And so figuring out, like, if you can come to your doctor with a product you want to use and a protocol for how you plan to use it, all you have to do is get
It's
them to
much
buy
more
in.
approachable at that
Yes.
point than saying, just posing the whole question.
What will
Right.
cannabis do? And I mean, I say that my girlfriend last weekend, she's a physician's assistant, and she's like, people ask me about it all the time, and I tell them I just don't know anything. And I'm like
Uh,
at least send them to me, like at least give
hey,
me a
yeah, send them to the
referral
Sage
here.
Advice.
But
No,
yeah, like
that program, that course sounds great and extremely helpful, right? To be able to, help women into that phase of life and perhaps find some respite, or some comfort, in their cannabis consumption. And kind of as you
right,
mentioned too, just in different therapeutic approaches, there may be ways to just actually prevent rather than treat.
right.
Obviously, not a doctor and coming from a man's perspective, so speaking out of place here, but
No, that's okay.
seeing the potential is awesome. I think that I love to see different therapeutic applications for the plant and just for folks to live better, right,
Yeah,
and have a happier life overall. So
and
that's
realize
what it's
that
there
it's so
for.
accessible. Like it's not even that far out of reach.
Right. It's not
We had
any further out of reach than that hand rolled joint that we
Nope,
discussed. It's on the same shelves, right?
right there. We had the company Hello Again joined us on one of our Monday calls, and they are a suppository company based out of California that is, their first product was specifically a suppository for menopause, and they have a couple other iterations of it right now. But
Okay.
we had such tremendous response to their joining us. And I would have thought, being, our community is maybe 25% women, right? There's a lot of times that I'm on a call and it's me and one other woman. And so I thought having a suppository company on talking about periods and menopause and all of these things that the boys were going to be like, ooh, um, unbelievable response rate and like just excitement around it. And I think because most people just really don't ever think of this product category. And so one of the more interesting uses that they had, Patty and Carrie from Hello Again were getting is for treatment for colorectal cancer, because there's not a lot that targets pain so specifically in that area. And so
I
it,
see.
the same
Yeah.
way that it can work, we have our greatest cluster of receptors in our reproductive organs, so men and women, and being able to treat so targeted to the area is really incredible. And they're finding a huge crossover in that area. So that to me alone says, like, hello, how are we not looking at this for so many more things? And why is this not a more common modality that people are tapping into?
That's definitely probably a quicker way into the mindset and the daily lifestyle of a larger segment of the population than infusing pre-rolls and making more peach gummies.
Right. Although people do love their peach gummies.
You can't go wrong with the peach gummy.
No.
But at this point, I'd say the market's saturated. So if you're out there and you're thinking about building a peach gummy business, maybe consider a different
Yeah.
flavor.
So this is what we don't have though. So this is what I'll say. If you're out there and you want to make a peach gummy, make me some peach rings that are 1 milligram each.
Ooh,
I want
microdose
to eat in
cannabis.
quantity. Like I understand that not everybody wants to do that, but I have the same thing. There's some pretzels here
It's not
that they
about
make.
dosing, it's about eating.
It's about eating. Like it's
Yeah.
about things that taste good and they need to have something to come behind them. There's a Minnesota brand called Granny's and they make these amazing cheddar pretzels and they're 1 milligram per pretzel. So I'm like, I can't really eat more than 15. Like that's my max. And so I have to cut them with Dots, which is it's a North Dakota brand of
So you just
pretzel. So
gotta mix them
I
up.
have my
Yeah.
little mix, but like I'm all over their Instagram saying like, this is what I need. I need there to be 50 pretzels in a bag, but I need the bag to be 10 milligrams. You can still charge me $10. Like it works to their advantage. I did the math for them and everything. And I'm just like, I still sit here and I have no pretzels and I would
Not
like them,
yet.
Grannies.
Hey, I'll make sure to mention them when we drop this podcast on Instagram.
They are like, honestly though, if you're here in the Midwest, seek them out because they're phenomenal.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I spent a few years in Minnesota, as we were talking before the show started, and unfortunately, it was before the edible laws got accidentally
Yeah.
signed in, before the cannabis laws really got their traction. And it would be awesome to go back and see the industry going, though. It seemed like the Twin Cities were prime for the industry. It's an
Well, what's
excellent
so
space for it.
fascinating about the industry here, though, is that it is really because it's only a year old, because it's entirely in the hemp edibles category. It is not the weed industry. It is the beer
True,
industry that they are on the backs of.
right? True CPG or more alcoholic is more in the beverage industry.
Correct. So there are very few beverage players that aren't using either the distribution or the manufacturing facilities of the craft beer industry. So our weed industry is essentially completely separate, and you're seeing a lot of friction now with adult use coming into play here in Minnesota in the next 18 months, and the way that the hemp operators have been in the space and are looking to make sure they can still operate within the guidelines of like now two very dualistic marketplaces.
Right. Oh, wow. Yeah, man, each state is so unique. The problems you would never would expect are just around the corner with every legalization.
It is. But what's interesting is I think the problems you're seeing in Minnesota, depending on how they shore up the next version of the Farm Bill, you're starting to see that in more and more states. You're seeing people, can, for example, selling across state lines. You're seeing
Yes.
THCA is popping up places. And it's like, well, that's just,
Yeah, it's going to be quite a shift here as two solutions battled in, or maybe two solutions can exist. Going to be some incentive if one can ship over the state borders for sure.
Well, and that's, I think, where they're pitting them against each other. And, to the point earlier is like we're already in a place that's overregulated and overly
Yeah,
competitive.
to add another pressure, right, is just unnecessary on so many businesses and so many markets there.
Hmm.
And man, now you got me longing for Minnesota. That's definitely a
Well,
good
listen,
place.
this is the time. You've got about 8 more weeks while you can come here. And then after that, I don't recommend it for a
Before the
while.
winter begins. Yes, that's the downside of that state for sure.
But
I
yeah.
will say, walking through like freshly fallen snow, there's like a certain vibe that Minnesota has that you really can't find anywhere else. But you don't
And
want to
it's
live in
the
that vibe all the
crunch.
time.
It's the crunch of the snow, and I can't help myself that I'm every time I see in the morning as I walk my dog, ice that's frozen over, like I have to walk through it every single time and break
Just
it. Like you
get
just
that
can't.
experience.
Uh-huh. But those truly are the moments you have to live for. Because to your point, most people don't want to live here all year round. And I get that. I don't really either, but I'm not wealthy enough to own two homes yet. And so for
Work
now,
in
while I do
progress.
still live here full time, I've had to shift my mindset and really just try to appreciate it and know that like like I guess this year it was like mid-April even still it was still snow, like we still had a blizzard in
Winter
mid-April, and I'm like
stays in
I'm
Minnesota.
like but
Yeah.
it's not going to be like this in July, and it's not. Like I'm happy to report that that is still true. When I tell myself in April it won't be like this in July, I have yet to see it snow in July.
When I moved there, I was moving from Colorado where I was working in a grow. And because of that lifestyle, I didn't really have a lot of winter coats or like cold weather
Hmm.
things. I just had my like basic coat. And that first winter in Minnesota just, oh man, it surprised me. I had to learn about wool socks. I never had to bundle up so much coming from
But you know
south,
what?
more south.
It's kind of fun when you learn how to do it. And I always say at a certain point, you can always put more clothes on, but you cannot take more clothes off.
Oh yeah, I'm dealing with that problem here in Vegas now when we are,
Yeah.
approaching 109 the other day.
Yeah. It's,
So
go ahead.
no, I was gonna say what's next for Sage Advice or for your kind of your efforts in the cannabis space. And you
Yeah.
mentioned the program coming up.
Yep, my live course on menopause. And in addition to
Yes.
that, I've started taking on some consulting clients on, anywhere from a 5 to 10 hour per month basis in Minnesota. Because what I have found here, I'm going to say the Midwest in general, and Chicago in particular, Illinois as a market, there is a lot of phenomenal business people with a lot of great ideas, and they don't have the depth of cannabis knowledge that they need to in order to effectively execute on them. And so, one thing I think I had mentioned before is going into this space, I was terrified that I wasn't going to know enough. And I've tried to learn as much as I can. And that's one of the reasons I contribute to my community as much as I do, is because I still learn so much. And every week I learn something. And so, in I want to be able to push that forward into the industry and be able to be that touch point for people so they don't have to do as much as I do. They just have to spend, 5 hours with me each month, and I will keep them at the level that they need to be at in order to be looking at their businesses from a future focused direction. Because, like, to your point, it is so oversaturated. Regulations are changing all the time. Keeping on top of all of that for people who don't have the network that I do can be really, really difficult. But I think that's where I'm really lucky, is I have cool conversations with people all week long. And so the
Yes,
ability
staying
to,
in
yeah,
the
to
scene
synthesize
constantly.
that for people and, package it in small people or small pieces and then apply it to their business is something like, that's a model I'd like to continue growing as I move forward, just so that builds, because it builds a better cannabis community. It builds better brands.
Right, right. The community makes the brand, so kind of
Yeah.
contributing there will definitely come back, right, in dividends.
Exactly. And so through that, I've had a couple brands that I've been working on, doing some speaking engagements for them and promoting, not necessarily even their products, but just cannabis in general as a healing modality. And then sort of products come in ancillarily as people start to look for, okay, well, what can I get? I'm in Iowa. How can I use this? And, CBD gets so tricky because finding quality products, again, can be very difficult. And if you don't know what to look for, you don't know if you found quality or not.
It's
So
getting easy
having,
to find, but the quality still
right.
is worth noting. What's easy to find
Yeah.
may not always be what you want to consume regularly.
So doing education around that and then allowing people to have access to where they can get quality products, just pointing them in the right direction. But
A
yeah, I
noble
mean,
fight for the cannabis space.
it
Yes.
is. Yeah, I think people always say, like, your best business is helping a version of yourself that you've been at some point in life. And I think, I look back to when I had two small kids versus the one small kid that I have right now, and just feeling really sort of lost and hopeless, and that cannabis has always helped me, like I said, feel like a better version of myself. And allowing myself to use it to be that version of myself and not let the stigma around it cloud that. It's been such an important part of my journey, and I want to empower other people to have that same level of confidence, and not just knowing, like, if I smoke I feel better, but saying I am using this and this intentionally because I understand it's doing this for me, it's doing this for me, and it's doing this
Right.
for me. And that's what my counter will always be to someone who's like, well, you're just sitting around smoking pot all day. And I'm like, yes, but
Some more to it, right? There's
right, like, and here's what I'm
Hamilton's
getting from it.
Pharmacopoeia. Have you ever seen that show?
Which ones?
I think it's called Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia.
I have
And
not.
it's a dude that goes like deep on all sorts of substances and often tries them to experience them to their fullest. And he
Mm-hmm.
talks about psychological determinism, where when you use a substance, I mean, it kind of comes more from the psychedelia mindset. But even with cannabis and with anything, what you intend for that
Mm-hmm.
use is really going to alter your experience and kind of alter the full effects, whether they be immediate or lasting. And I think there's definitely some truth to that with cannabis, and that you could have that
Absolutely.
vibe of like, I'm smoking because I'm just gonna chill all day, man. Right? I'm gonna kick my feet back and do nothing. Or you could be, hard at work, building, multiple learning courses and,
Right.
education platforms like you're doing now.
That's how you find your flow state. And that's, like,
Exactly.
that to me is the cool thing, is it is different for everyone. And it's not just because our bodies are different. It's not just because we smoke different strains. It's different because we have different intentions behind it. And so to think of it as a singular thing that makes a difference. Well, you smoked indica, I smoked sativa. That's why it was different. It's like, no, that's not,
Right.
that's one part of it, is the actual makeup of the plant, but there's all these other things that go into it.
All that good stuff. Well, Elizabeth, we'll definitely have to have you back on to keep on the conversation here and maybe look at
Yeah.
what would be like the level 2 now of the cannabis knowledge and understanding. In the meantime, where can our listeners find out more about you and connect with you, or where can certified ganjiers track down the ongoing communities?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. I'm pretty active there at the Sage Ganjier. You can also find me in our own community in Discord. I post all of our classes on there weekly, all of our sessions, the cultivars that we're looking at. I try to post stuff about the different guests that we have and make sure that they're accessible, because that's the other thing that's really cool to me, is everyone we've had help teach us on Mondays has also been so generous with their time with the community and giving back, and building these relationships, right? Because there's a lot of really great farmers out there that are in really tough positions right now, and so helping to connect them and the greater Ganjier community has been a really cool thing to watch unfold. And I hope that when we look back on this in 10 years and we have federal descheduling, right? That's what I would like, just not even on the schedule at all, or a schedule 5. Like, I think we'll look back at this time, and I hope to see all of these great farmers having persevered through all of this. I hope that we see interstate commerce. And I hope that we see people playing a little bit nicer with each other. I don't know why I expect cannabis to have a little bit bigger heart. I think because people fought for so long for this, it really pisses me off to see people fighting now over the stupidest stuff when it's like you're letting the government do now with regulations what they couldn't do with laws for 40 years. And it's just, it breaks my heart to see everybody fighting so much over a plant that's supposed to symbolize so much more.
Right. Yeah. Appreciating kind of where we come with the plant and kind of as a communities.
Bring some of that back into it.
Times easier said than done as folks see green money.
Exactly.
But yeah, you're definitely making an impact, Elizabeth. Yeah, I appreciate what you're doing for the Ganjier community, and I think your education platform will for sure attract some attention as well.
Yeah, I hope we can do for the general public. Imagine how a well-educated general public, what kind of products and creations that people could come up with if the public demanded it, right? That's where innovation comes from, is public demand. So if everybody will stop smoking mids, then we can demand more. But it takes each person educating themselves and wanting more for themselves, and you can't do that until you know better.
That's your takeaway point for this episode, folks. Stop smoking mids.
Exactly.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you for listening to the Apartment 113 podcast. For more information about the show and our range of services, visit apt113.com. We offer cannabis operations consulting, agile product management, and connoisseurship services. With over a decade of experience in the cannabis industry, Apartment 113 is here to help.